Inspired by poetry.
Let's give it some lip.
Ta-da!
Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm with TB and we're going to be looking at poems this week. TB, how you doing?
I am doing great.
You're doing great, huh? Have you been inspired by poetry this week?
I have been inspired, but I'm going to talk about why I'm feeling great. My aunt, who's 94 years old, would always say, I'm above ground today, and I feel above ground.
That's good.
So
it could be worse.
It could be worse. But I think that as I think about, the poems that have been feeding, I haven't gone out and looked for these poems. They've just been showing up on my feed.
Oh, they've come to you.
They've come to me.
Somehow you've attracted them to you.
The gremlins are sending me a message. The gremlins out there in the cyber gods are sending me a message, and I read it loud and clear, and I thought we'd want to share it with others.
That sounds interesting. And what do you think, now that you've selected these two, what do you think the gremlins have been telling you?
Well, I think the gremlins are saying, notice around you the many people that are alone and they're going through something. And maybe you have a responsibility to help them through this process through the poems. And I thought, let me give that. I'm hoping that someone who's feeling really isolated or really alone, something within these poems will resonate and it'll make them feel better.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
It should be an inspiration to us.
I hope so.
And now, even if it doesn't hit the person who might be feeling lonely, an inspiration to us who see that, to look for it, and to be a blessing to them in some way.
And the two poets that we're dealing with are very different.
Yes, you have Charles Bukowski and Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes. And I know, it's as night and day as I can think of it. And Bukowski, I'm just digging his vibe. So just really the temperament around the community and what he would say. And he just had this loose way of talking. And he speaks that way in his poems. It's just the everyday language of our lives.
Nice. Well, let's start with his.
We'll start with his.
Yes.
So this one's called The Crunch. Too much, too little, too fat, too thin, or nobody. Laughter or tears, haters, lovers. Strangers with faces like the back of thumbtacks. Armies running through streets of blood, waving wine bottles, bayoneting, and effing virgins. Or an old guy in a cheap room with a photograph of M. Monroe. There's a loneliness in this world so great that you can see it in the slow movement of the hands of a clock. Wow. People so tired, mutilated either by love or no love. People just are not good to each other one-on-one. The rich are not good to the rich, the poor are not good to the poor. We are afraid. Our education system tells us that we can all be big-ass winners. It hasn't told us about the gutters and the suicides or the terror of one person aching in one place alone, untouched, unspoken to, watering a plant. People are not good to each other. People are not good to each other. People are not good to each other. I suppose they never will be. Don't ask them to be. But sometimes I think about it. The beads will swing, the clouds will cloud, and the killer will behead the child, like taking a bite out of an ice cream cone. Too much, too little, too fat, too thin, or nobody. More haters than lovers. People are not good to each other. Perhaps if they were, our deaths would not be so sad. Meanwhile, I look at young girls' stems, flowers of chance. There must be a way, surely there must be a way we have not yet thought of. Who put the brain inside of me? It cries, it demands, it says, there is a chance. It will not say no.
Whoa. That's an interesting poem. It goes all over the place. It is a roller coaster ride.
It does.
As we go through all of these images that are presented to us and the ideas that this poem covers. And that idea at the end, it cries, it demands, it says, and it will not say no. Yeah. That's hope.
That's hope.
That's hope.
That's what I really love about that. The vibe of this is you can't pretty up what you see. It just is what it is. But in the end, it comes back to we have to have the sense of hope, right?
We do.
And the line that resonates with me is people are not good to each other.
It's repeated 4 times, 3 times straight in a row, and then again a little bit later. And it just is like, hello, wake up. We can be better.
That's a change, right?
Yeah.
People are not good to each other.
Yeah.
And we don't see the loneliness. A graphic thing for me is the Marilyn Monroe depiction of a guy in a room, lonely, looking at what he has idealized or he hopes for, or he aspires, very vivid images. So I love the imagery in this.
So much. And some of the other techniques are just as poignant as those. This moment that there is a loneliness in this world so great that you can see it in the slow movement of the hands of a clock. Have you ever just stared at a clock for a while?
I did.
And you just realize how long a minute is if you just sit there. Wow, that speaks volumes with just that little bit of a metaphor, that kind of analogy there. And we're like, wow.
And a metaphor that belongs at a certain age, because if you grow up in the digital, you may never have seen this,
you don't even have to know where the hands go anymore.
Remember when we were taught how to read? This is a watch, and this is how you read it.
That was great. That was great. Yeah, and there's quite a few of these like anaphora moments, the untouched, unspoken to. I suppose I don't ask.
Yeah.
The beads will sing, the clouds will cloud. I love that. Yeah. And the killer will behead the child. So we have that anaphoric moment there. Too much, too little. And then again at the end, it cries, it demands, it says.
And I love the killer will behead the child like taking a bite out of an ice cream cone. Yes,
the two in that simile, the comparison there could not be more extreme.
Yes. And it's kind of a doubling of it, isn't it? The child eating the ice cream, the killer eating the child, kind of thing, like the ice cream. So I really love that. I think just very graphic, powerful, like you say, in this, but I can see that as I look around how we're not good to each other.
We're not good with the messages we put out.
No.
The way that we advertise things, that too thin, too much, too fat, too thin, too little. Like, these are all things that we wrestle with.
Yeah.
Am I good enough? Am I doing enough? Am I nothing?
And the extremes, right? They're polarizing. They're polarizing. Our education system tells us that we can all be not just winners, but big ass winners, right? It hasn't told us about the gutters or the suicides. So it doesn't tell us. We don't tell the stories of the other side.
We obfuscate that. We hide it. Don't look there. Don't look there.
Yeah.
Look over here. You can be anything you want to be. Yeah. True, but it's going to take work. It's going to take hope. It's going to take you, looking around and seeing yourself as part of something bigger. If we just sit and focus on what we don't have.
And a single line between the untouched, unspoken to, watering a plant.
Yeah.
We're feeding it, right?
Yeah.
We're watering a plant. We're feeding all of this that we do, we're feeding it like watering a plant. And then it reminds us that people are not good to each other 3 times.
Yeah.
The repetition in that for me is very, very profound in the essence of, hey, pay attention.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's so easy to get out of connectivity. It's so difficult to plug yourself back in. Yeah. And a lot of times it takes somebody from outside of yourself to come, hey, come along.
Come back.
Hey, be here. Hey, how you doing? Little things are all that most of us need to stay connected to this world and to others.
Yeah.
And it's all about our relationships.
And it is. And I think that's what Bukowski is for me as a poet, a man of the streets. So I was watching films about him where he's just walking along, introducing himself and talking to the neighbors. And I imagine that he gets most of his inspiration from the day to day.
That's right.
And I love that because he's a part of the society that he writes about. He's not writing about it as a third party sitting outside or above or in a hidden room, right? Yeah. He's out there and he talks about what he observes on the streets every day. And I just love the crunch.
It's so good. And this moment here, people so tired, mutilated, either by love or no love. Yeah. Interesting how either love or no love can get you to the
same place.
Yes,
right? And that's what he's good at. He's going polarization, but consequence seems to be the same, you know, and he comes back to that. Really love it.
Very nice. Now let's contrast that, shall we?
Yes.
Let's look at Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is one of the iconic American authors for short story and poetry. Most people will have been familiar with this name, but usually synonymous with horror and suspense. I remember reading The Fall of the House of Usher when I was quite young. And it's about, well, all of his things, but all of his has something about being buried alive. And so there was this moment in there. But I've always been struck by how every element that Poe includes all work together to create a specific effect.
Yeah.
He's one of those poets and writers where he thinks about the entire aesthetic the entire time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the technician, right?
He is a technician.
He's the technician.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And he brings it into being very well. So this is one of his called Alone. From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from everyday depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still, from the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took the form when the rest of heaven was blue of a demon in my view.
Technician.
What? It's so good because when it starts out, it's very conversational, almost prose-like, because he's using that technique of enjambment where he's not stopping the line at the end of the line. So you don't hear the rhyme because I have to read it by running over into the next line. And it is only until we get to that anaphoric moment, from the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, that rhyme really stands out.
Yeah.
So fabulous, because like you wouldn't even know I was actually reading a poem at the beginning because it's just these lines and ideas that run and meld.
Yeah, they meld together.
Yeah. But when you look at it, you can see it's been and seen, bring and spring, taken, awaken, tone alone.
Yeah.
You didn't hear it because that wasn't where the stop was.
So though technically it's written that way, when you are actually reciting it, you recite it to move through that more quickly than you would. So you don't hear how pronounced the rhyme is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that takes talent.
It's just so much talent. Enjambment, or like enjambment is what they say in the French, or enjambment, as we do in our American tongue or Western tongue. But it's difficult because you have to know your ending, but no, that's not the ending of the idea, and have to move on. And what that creates is that kind of conversational feel. It kind of flows. There's a smoothness to it until we get down to where each line is having its beat. And now all of a sudden it moves so much faster in those lines, didn't it? I mean, I can't read it any differently. I didn't speed up my reading of the line, but it was just what the line demanded.
Yeah.
I love that about poetry, is that the lines demand, and they make you read them a certain way.
And the uniqueness of within the same piece of work, you can have a beginning that's conversational, that feels more like prose, and then goes into a more poetic stance at the end.
That's right.
You know, and that's beautiful. Well, and what I love about the uniqueness, because he talks about alone in terms of your uniqueness, right?
Yeah.
The things that only you and you alone, right? And so is this poem,
That's
right?
Yeah.
So he's created, so he's not only crafted the conversation or discourse around being the aloneness and the uniqueness of that, but also within the technical side of it. Because it's written technically very different than most.
It is. Yeah. It is. And when you read it this way, you can see that childhood's hour, I have not been. It's very elongated vowels and those kind of continuant consonants, and then you get to when he does get into the where the rhyme is significant, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took its form. Like it's almost monosyllabic, and each word kind of has a harsh sound to it, and so you get this kind of euphonic moment at the beginning, which is much more conversational, which flows from line to line, to a more cacophonous moment, almost staccato-like. And each of those are kind of punchy in the way that it's created. So fabulous. But the content is also good.
It is.
So, you know me, I love to look at how it's written. But you look at this too, and you see it's talking about, and all I loved alone. I love that idea. And all I loved alone. And then it goes, then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from the every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. That's where it starts. That's where the ill and still resonate as the rhyme. Before that, we don't have it. So it's really, I love the way that it's put together, and this idea that something changed, something stirred. All I loved alone. Then, in my childhood. And we're like, oh, where are we going now?
I just think the last line, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon, in my view.
Yeah.
Like I just very, very coming, and if you think of this right above that, all the references to the heavens and the sky. I mean, it's just, I love Edgar Allan Poe. I think as a master technician.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorites.
So learn a lot. Really love this. My heart to joy at the same, and all I've loved.
And there's just so much, so much celestial imagery with the lightning and the thunder and the clouds and the heavens. Yeah, it kind of gives us this ethereal feel.
Yeah.
Like something is happening supernaturally in some ways.
Yeah.
Like even though those are natural elements, it's elevating. In my childhood, something changed. All of a sudden, I started to see things.
Yeah.
And then that cloud took a shape, and it was a demon, kind of thing. And we're like, oh wait, no, come back. But like being taken, and I, in some ways, it's like being taken by the creativity gene. Yeah. That impulse, and where it takes you can be quite dark. Yeah. And you don't realize that, it's from his childhood. He was having these visions and stuff, and so he's always talking back to those in his writing.
And he's recognized the moment where he's got that this is it. Like he's pinpointing that it happens at some point, and he's drawing from his experiences around that.
He's pinpointing the moment he realized what it was, because he was telling us, I have not been as others were, I have not seen as others saw, from the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
So I was like, something's weird. Then, in my childhood, I realized. And we're like, oh, look at you. Yeah. You're an artist. That's what it is.
Exactly. that when creativity is awashes, right? It's the word that I'm thinking. It's that when it's no longer, now. Yeah. Why you're not like others.
Right. So you don't have to
you don't have to make excuses for it anymore.
Right? Wonder, is there something wrong with me? No, you've been blessed with a gift.
Yeah. I love it. And then if you look at how vivid the descriptors are, and once that happens, you can see the creative self taking over, right? Yeah. And what it creates is very different.
Yeah, because it says straight away, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill. Yeah. Right? So he's like, he's looking at
the mystery.
In the mystery of it all.
That binds me still. That's from the torrent or the fountain. Doesn't matter where the source is.
That's right. Red cliff of the mountain. So you got the depths, you got the heights. If we broke this down, there'd be so much in every line. I know. And the way that it's put together. But what an amazing voice. Yeah. Obviously, as we said, the technique is unique and it's specific, and it is innovative, and it performs the message of the poem as much as the content does. Yeah. And that's what I love about his work, is he really thinks about, like, we are all very familiar with Raven, but he wanted a certain effect. He wanted that kind of or sound to be there the whole time. And so he crafted those lines. He used a different rhythm and beat so that it's a little off-putting as you read it. He wanted the whole thing to have that sense. And I can see that in this poem as well.
Yeah.
He wanted you to be like, there was something wrong, something amiss, and then everything came together at the end. And I think that's the poem itself. Doesn't read like a poem, like we would expect.
It's not standard. It's not standard.
And then all of a sudden it comes into its form.
Yeah. And he's actually taking you along in his own journey, isn't he? It's like, at first, then, kind of like, and you could feel it. Like I felt it was rhythmic in the way that it flowed from let's get along here. And then, like you say, the intensity. So for me, the second half of it had the intensity of all the emotive things he wanted you to feel on this journey, as that he recognized the moment. And then in my childhood, then I could see it. And then it didn't matter where it came from, right? It's all over.
It's like synapses.
And it's not the one place. It's
how you have those synapses in your brain when something, it's the fireworks inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, I think your gremlins steered you well.
My gremlins were good. So keep sending me stuff, gremlins. I'm not going to complain about it anymore.
This was great. Yeah. Thank you for these. I've been really challenged by some of the ideas within, something to think about, and especially looking at those techniques that both of them are using, so unique in their own forms, and each of them gifted beyond belief.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you gifted us these poems and that they gifted the poems to the world.
And I really hope that if you haven't heard about these two poets, please look them up and read some more. I mean, these are some of the greats, I have just to say. Some of the greats.
Well, we'll probably bring some more.
Yeah, we'll bring some more. There's this week's greats, and then there's next week's greats, and there's the other week's greats. But these are some of the greats.
That's
right. I'm very thankful. So, gremlins, happy? Up the bar a little bit. So it's really hard for you to go anywhere from here. But, all the time.
I think they'll surprise you.
They'll surprise me. They always do. They always do.
Excellent.
So... And thank you for sharing this moment with me.
No problem. I always enjoy our time together. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining as well. And until next time, have a life inspired by poetry.
Thanks, everyone.